according to this article, as you can see on screen, by Boxing Scene, Oleksandr Gvozdyk is preparing for a comeback. I find this to be strange news and certainly out of the blue. If you want to check out this article, I'll leave it linked in the description as always. It really just provides mostly backstory on Gvozdyk, his career, the lead up to him retiring, and there are some quotes. I think he's had an interview, or he's at least been in a video with Eli Sekbak and ES News, and it says, I'm going to read from the article here, regardless of the murky image near the summit of the 175-pound division, Gvozdyk is determined to crash the party, and while he's well aware that he has a bit of rust to work off, if any of the top contenders are in need of an opponent, Gvozdyk reveals that he's ready, willing and able to make his return on relatively short notice. And there's a quote from Gvozdyk saying, "I can make weight within a month." Okay, so yeah, you can check out the rest of the article if you want. I'm not going to get into it because there's a lot of stuff that we already know. But on that note, for those people who don't know why this is even remotely significant, it's because Oleksandr Gvozdyk, he retired in, I think it was summer of 2020. So it's been just over 2 years. And he basically retired following his stoppage loss to Artur Beterbiev. And that was a light heavyweight title unification. And it was a good fight. It was a relatively competitive fight, but as you probably imagine, Beterbiev, like he is for most fighters, he was just too much, and he started to manhandle Gvozdyk. And what happened was, after that fight, I'm going off of memory, but I remember Gvozdyk being concerned because he had to go to the hospital because he was complaining of a particularly bad headache at the back of his head. And what many people interpreted it as is the time when Gvozdyk announced his retirement was that he had been spooked, he'd been shaken up, because he had just suffered this loss to a devastating puncher and knockout artist in Beterbiev. But a year prior to that, or not even a year, it was like 11 or 10 months, in December of 2018, Gvozdyk won the WBC heavyweight title off of Adonis Stevenson. And that was a fight that left Adonis Stevenson crippled and permanently injured, and he had to go into a coma for a few weeks at least following that fight. And as I say, many people interpreted it as Gvozdyk has lost, not necessarily just lost his edge, but he's been, as I say, he's been spooked, because this can happen. We've seen it historically when a fighter has permanently injured an opponent and they lose their killer instinct, and they fall out of love for the sport that they've dedicated their lives to, because they realize, I've just played a part in someone's life being turned upside down. And not only is there potential for it to happen to another opponent, and you have to go through that process of feeling blame for someone else's life almost being lost, or being lost in some cases, but there's the potential that it could happen to you yourself. And I suspect that played a big role in Oleksandr Gvozdyk retiring, is because he'd already gone through the trauma of crippling another man in Adonis Stevenson, and then he's come up in his fight against Beterbiev, lost badly, feels worried, he's got this banging headache, having to spend time in hospital, because also as well, Gvozdyk lost to Beterbiev in the amateurs. He got stopped in that fight too. I think that was back in, I want to say 2009, I think. I've never seen the fight, I've just seen the record, and I'm pretty sure it's 2009, so it was a long time before. But you have to imagine that these kind of demons that Oleksandr Gvozdyk has had to go through, they stick with you. And so I can perfectly understand, I'm sure many objective observers would understand why Gvozdyk would retire, because he's just damaged someone, and he's gone in against this guy who's a bit of a boogeyman, who's already beat him before, and he wasn't able to overcome it. That kind of stuff can really shatter your spirit, and no matter how much you love boxing, some guys, they're just not willing to take it to as extreme a length as other fighters. And that's perfectly fine. That's normal. Because at the end of the day, if you're a fighter, and this is, I guess, a bit of a takeaway for any, I don't know, young amateur or young professional who may be listening to this, it's your career, it's your life, it's your prerogative. You make the choices that you feel are best. So as a selfish boxing fan, I really liked Gvozdyk. I liked his style. I felt like he was a very complete fighter. The only thing that seemed to lack was his punch resistance. But other than that, I felt that this guy would really go on to make waves in the light heavyweight division. And I guess you could say he did, because he beat Adonis Stevenson, who was a long reigning light heavyweight champion. Picked up some good wins against contenders on the way. But I think it's fair to say that given Gvozdyk's talent level, I certainly think that he underachieved. But at the same time, I can understand why he called it a day and retired. But if we come onto this news now, where Gvozdyk is preparing for a comeback potentially, I want to try and read in between the lines and maybe interpret what's going on here. Because I think it's one of those things where it depends on who you're around, what setting you're in, what side of the bed did you wake up in the morning. Because, you know, sometimes you just have a bit of an effort. You know, I'm not gonna say the word because the algorithm's kind of tough. But you know, you have an effort mentality. You know what? I'm not gonna let anything stop me. I'm gonna go for it. I want to fight again. I want to get back in the ring. I want to go for the gold and win world titles. I'm gonna go for it. I don't care about the consequences, be it to me or my opponent. Where there are other days where you're like, you know what? I love boxing. I love fighting. I love the glory, but it's just not worth it. It's just not worth the risk. I suspect that this is what Oleksandr Gvozdyk may be experiencing, because we have to consider as well, he's always going to be in that circle of boxing fraternity, because two of his closest friends are Lomachenko and Oleksandr Usyk, and they've enjoyed massive success recently. In particular, Usyk, who became cruiserweight champion, undisputed, went up to heavyweight and did, you know, an absolute job on Anthony Joshua twice. And you're around that kind of success, you want your piece. And sometimes you don't necessarily think about why you took a step back in the first place. Gvozdyk has also been in camp with Canelo. I think it was in the lead up to the Dmitry Bivol fight. Canelo and Gvozdyk was sparring. Once again, Canelo, he's at the top of the tree in terms of boxing achievement, also boxing paydays. And so there's always going to be that, I don't want to say bait, but that temptation. You know, I'm around these guys, they can do it, why can't I? But then how long is it going to be until someone like Oleksandr Gvozdyk remembers why he called it a day in the first place? So, as I say, as a selfish boxing fan, I would have loved to seen Oleksandr Gvozdyk really get the most out of his career and continue fighting to see how far he could go. Because light heavyweight wasn't even now, it's still a stacked division full of loads of dangerous guys, talented guys. And Oleksandr Gvozdyk, in my opinion, was one of them. I felt like he was one of the best technicians. He had a mean streak. He had good power. He had a good selection of shots. He had the skill. Lacked the punch resistance a little bit, but once again, from that selfish boxing fan's perspective, that makes for entertaining fights when either guy can get hurt, or one guy's got loads of skill and maybe not the best punch resistance and his opponent's not the most skilled but is a big puncher. It all makes for excitement. But I'm not sure if anything's going to materialize from this. Maybe Gvozdyk is just kind of in his feelings a little bit. He feels like he can take on the world. But in boxing, they're at the highest level, at the elite level, there is no room for doubt. And I imagine that there are still doubts in Gvozdyk's head. Even though this article's come out and he says he's ready and he can take anyone on, he can make weight in a month. How long until those doubts creep in again? Those initial doubts that caused him to retire in the first place. I don't have confidence, you know. Maybe all it could take is one punch from a decent, heavy-handed fighter and all of a sudden you have those concerns again. You know, the fighters who tend to get the furthest, a lot of the time they have the most extreme mentality, where they don't care about losing their life in the ring. They don't care about taking an opponent's life in the ring. Sometimes that's even their goal. And it just allows them to see out the storm. Their body can be in absolute pieces. Their head can be absolutely, have a banging headache. Surely not a good sign, but they dig in and they carry on anyway. And look, that's their right, that's their prerogative, but it's not for everyone. And there's no shame in knowing your limit. We're all different. We all have different lives, walking different paths. But yeah, I found it interesting anyway. What do you think in the comment section below? Do you think that something may come of this and Gvozdyk actually does come back? And if so, are you interested? Are you uninterested? Because I believe Gvozdyk's only 35, I want to say. He hasn't fought in over 2 years. I suspect, let's check his age. Yeah, he's 35 years old. So that's not too old. He has pedigree, which he can rely on, but he will have to shake off that ring rust if he comes back. But yeah, are you interested? Are you uninterested? Would you like to see him back like I would in other circumstances? I can't say I would like to see him now, but let me know in the comment section below. And if you completely don't care, I kind of wonder why you sat through this whole 10+ minute video, but there it is. Thanks for the views. But yeah, leave it down below. I'll get back to you. And as always, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next video.